AP Computer Science, a P4G. This is a video to help you kind of set up the skeleton of the program so that you can have a working version to test, talk about like creating a driver and stuff for it. We'll just try and fill in some of the basics here. So this was the assignment, P4G. This is old response question, LogMessage. I put these methods on here as sort of like just a reminder of some things that might be helpful. There are going to be strings involved, and so you're going to want to use string functions. So it says this question involves two classes that are used to process log messages. A list of sample log messages is given below. The log messages have the format machine ID :description, where machine ID identifies the computer and description describes the event being logged. Exactly one colon appears in log messages. There are no blanks, either immediately before or after, immediately after the colon. The following log message class is used to represent log message: public class log message, private instance variables string machine ID description, constructor public log message takes a string message, the whole message. You're going to create the constructor. We don't necessarily need to do zero arg. We could if we want, but this is. And then there's another method, Boolean, returns true or false, contains word, and you put a keyword in. It returns true if the description in this log message properly contains the keyword, false otherwise. They're going to get into more detail later when they talk about part B about exactly what properly contains means. There's a getter, get machine ID and get description, basic getters. We could create a toString if we want. So that's that part. And so part A, write the constructor for the log message class. It must initialize the private data of the object so that get machine ID returns the machine ID part of the message, and get description returns the description part of the message. Those will work fine as long as you initialize your private instance variables correctly. So I'm not going to even start looking at part. Part B says write the log message method contains word which returns true if the description in the log message properly contains given keyword and returns false otherwise. A description properly contains a keyword if all three of the following conditions are true. So these are the different possibilities. All of these things have to be true at the same time. The keyword is a substring of the description. It's got to be in there somewhere. It's either at the beginning or it has to be preceded by a space. So if it's not at the beginning, it needs a space in front of it. And then it's either at the end, and if it's not at the end, then it has to be followed by a space. Then they give you some examples. Following table shows several examples. The descriptions in the left table properly contain keyword disk. Descriptions in the right table do not properly contain keyword disk. It's good to go through this and make sure you understand what the criteria are. So disk, it's the whole thing. Disk, it's at the end with a space in front of it. Otherwise, it'd be the whole word. Disk with a space in front of it. This disk doesn't count. Disk in the middle with a space before and after. So it's either at the beginning or has a space in front of it. It's either at the end or has a space after it. So if it's not at the beginning or the end, it has to have a space before and after. Can't be capitalized. Can't have an extra number on the end of it. If it's on the end, it's got to be followed by a space. It's got to be followed by space and preceded by a space. It has to be, if it's at the beginning, then it has to be followed by a space right there, which this one's not. So those are just some examples that you could make sure your logic will attack those correctly. So let's create some of the structure for this. So I'm going to create a new project. We'll call it, let's see. So we're going to call this P4G. P4G. Okay, so going back here, we'll call it P4G project. P4G project. All right, and we'll create a new class, and we're going to name it exactly the way it is. So we're going to do the log message class. Okay. I'm going to open it up, get rid of everything in here. Public class log message. You guys should be great at this stuff. Okay. End class log message. Okay, so I mean, they showed us some stuff in there. They have private instance variables that are strings. So machine ID, it's lowercase d. Let's do it exactly the way they did it. Private string description, and then public log message. This is the constructor. It takes a string, which they call message, and your job is to end one our constructor. Your job is to take this message, which has all of this with a colon in it, and break it up and get the machine ID part and put it in a machine ID, and get the description part and put it in there. So here's the deal. It's one big string with all that stuff together with one colon in between it. So you probably want to figure out where the colon is. I would say index of, the string method index of would be really helpful. Identify the location of the colon and then use that location and maybe with substring to get the parts that you need to put into each of those. So that's as much help as I'm going to give you there. Then we have public Boolean. It's going to return true or false, contains word. And so you give it a keyword, the client class gives it a keyword and decides if it properly contains it or not, and then returns true or false. Probably going to need this for another one. So you better have a return statement in here. I'm thinking you should be breaking this down into an if, else if, else if, else if, else kind of structure where you go through all the different special cases. Is it the whole word? Is it at the beginning of the word with space after it? Is it at the end of the word with space before it? Is it in the middle with a space before and after it? And if it's not one of those, and that's the last scenario, then it's false. If it's any of those other ones, it's true. So you want to specifically look for each scenario. And then there's getter, public string get machine ID, return machine ID. And then a getter for the description, get description. Usually getters are zero arg methods. They're accessors. You're just giving information. Description. Now, we could add a toString here just to make it more usable, you know, in the driver, we might want to actually print out, make a nice printable version of the log message. So this wouldn't be your responsibility on the AP test, but to make a working version, get a public string to string. And so we could say return, and it'd be easy, machine ID. Essentially, it's going to reconstruct what you started with. But you can't, yeah. So I'm going to reconstruct. Should have a colon in between with no spaces, and then description. So it's going to pretty much spit back out what was given to it originally when it was constructed. And so, I mean, it's pretty easy toString. Then we won't have to use like get description, get machine ID to print out. So we could use this in a driver when we want to print out a nice version of it. So your job is to create the constructor, which is not too bad. The contains word takes a little more thought. You got to really kind of think about the different special cases, and then how do you identify them. And index of is going to be really handy on both for the constructor and contains word. Index of, you tell it what you want to look for, and it'll tell you the location of it, the first location of it. If it's not there, it returns a -1. It returns an int, returns a number for the location of the letter or string. And then if it's not there, it returns a -1. So you probably want to try and use something. Use that. Okay. Let's see. So that's done. So we need to, now we could create another new class. Now this is part B. So let's take a look at it real quick. So we understand how that all works now. Or part C. Part C says the system log class represents a list of log message objects. So this is class composition. This class contains log messages, the one we were just talking about, a list of them, like an array list, and provides a method that removes and returns a list of all the log messages, if any, that can properly contain a given keyword. The messages in the return list appear in the same order in which they originally appeared in the system log. If no message properly contains keyword, an empty list is returned. The declaration of system log class is shown below. So we're going to create this. So what it says is, so it has a private instance variable here. It has a constructor that I don't think they're showing us, so we could add that. Then it has this method. So this is an array list. Array lists are in the class of lists. So this is an array list of log messages. So the constructor would probably take an array list of log messages also to initialize that. Then the method you're really responsible for here is remove messages. String keyword removes from the system log all entries whose descriptions properly contain keyword, and returns a list, possibly empty, containing the removed entries. Post condition: entries in the return list properly contain keyword and are in the order in which they appeared in the system log. The remaining entries in the system log do not properly contain keyword and are in their original order. The return list is empty if no messages properly contain keyword. So they give an example here. They say, so here's some log messages. The call log message remove messages disk would returns a list containing log message objects representing the following, the ones that were removed. So one, it stores them in this new array list that we will return, and it removes them. Two actions. Probably want to store it before you remove it, otherwise it's gone, right? And then after it's done, the original, the log system log of messages, the array list of messages still has these in it. So you get this array list returned to you, and then this is what's left. So it actually changes the private instance variable. So, I mean, my advice here is I would probably do a for loop. I don't know if a for each loop is going to work, but I'd probably do a for loop and use part B contains word to check it, because we've created this method that works already. Check that. If it's true, store it in this new list. You got to create a new array list in the method to hold the ones that you take out. Store it in there, then remove it, and then keep going through the whole array list, and then return it. Return the new list of the deleted items. So over here, we need to create this class. So it is called system log. System log. And we're going to open it up, and we're going to get rid of everything. And so public class system log, and then has a private instance variable, which they showed you. They said it's a private list. This is kind of more of a generic type of array list. Log message. So it holds log message objects, the things that we were doing in part A and B. And they call it message list. Okay. Then they have a constructor, public, of course, system log. Now, they didn't show this constructor, so we could create a 0R constructor, and inside here, initialize message list equals new array list that holds log message objects. But I mean, for the AP test, you don't have to do any of this. End 0arg constructor. Now, public system log. Let's do one where it takes in an array list from the client class. We'll say list message. Log message objects. We call it initial message list, or whatever you want to call it. And then message list equals initial message list. So this is a constructor that you weren't responsible for on the AP test for this question, but this will help us make a working version of it. And one arg constructor. Public. Now this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do this method that returns a list of log message objects. Okay. It's called remove messages. And it takes a string keyword. And so this is your end method remove messages. End class system. Now, so in here, you're going to want to create a new array list, right? Create a new array list to store the remove messages. Then do a for loop where you use your contains word method from the log message class and you call it on each log message object in the array list with this keyword, if it returns true, that means it's in there and you want to remove it. But you also want to put it into the new array list that you created inside here. Go through the whole thing, and then at the end, you want to return that new array list full of the removed messages. The current message list in this class should be shorter now. So what we can do is we can create a toString, public string toString, string output, whatever you want to call it, equals empty. Because what we're going to do is we want to print out the guts int index equals 0. We want to print out the message list. So we'll want to print it out before we run the remove messages and after to confirm it did its job. Index less than message list dot size index plus plus in 4. So we could say output plus equals message list dot get index. So this will rely on the toString in the other class that we created and just add these on there. Now we could do like on a new, we could do with like a new line plus slash new line. Did I do that right? And then after we're done with that, we want to return the output message. Okay, so we return that. So that should just help us be able to make a working version that we could check. So this will just print out the guts of the private instance variable here, which is an array list. Let's see. Okay. I guess I was just trying to make sure that I actually did the correct new line character. Oh, no, it's supposed to be /n, I think. I always forget that. It's been a while. Okay. So I think that should work. But your job is to go through and find the messages that have the keyword use contains word from your other class. Okay, so now we need a driver. Oh, you know what we forgot in here? Because we have an array list in here, we need to import. So I'll help you out there also. Import java.util.list and import java.util.arraylist. Okay, that'll help out. Now it's probably not going to compile. Well, it saved it. It's not going to compile because it's, oh, I made a mistake earlier in that other class. Thinking it's not going to compile. Description, I don't know. Did I misspell it? Oh, I did. I misspelled it right here. Description. Okay. It's going to not want to compile because it's missing return statements. But found a couple little mistakes. Does this one compile? It's missing return statement, so it's not going to, doesn't like that. Okay. So let's create a driver. So now you can see the class composition. System log has log messages in it. So we'll call this one system log driver. So public class system log driver. So this is the one where we need a main method so that we can actually run it. So public static void main string args. We're gonna create some arrays in here to feed to our system log class and construct it. So we need to import java.util lists and import java.util.arraylist. Okay, so in here, I'm gonna try and recreate at least the example that they gave in the problem. And this will help us test everything, I think. I mean, we could get more specific. A list log message. So it's going to hold log message objects. I'm going to call it log equals new array list of log message objects. And then I'm going to add the yeah, this will be good. This will help us clear there. I'm going to say log.add, and I'm going to create these new log message. So I'm using the constructor that we had to write. I'm just copying client tree security alert repeated login failures. Okay. Log.add new log message. So we're feeding these messages to our constructor. This one was web server. No space between the colon. It specifically said that disk offline. So we want to copy these exactly the way they are. Why my tabbing's off? Okay. Log dot add new log message. This one was server 1 file not found. Log.add new log message. Server, in quotations, is string, server 2 colon read error on disk DSK1. Log.add new log message. I mean, you can see what I'm doing. You can just go back and look at the assignment. You don't need to follow exactly what I'm saying. Okay, so that's server 1, server 2, and then it says server 1 colon write error on disk ESK2 log.add new log message. Web server error on slash dev slash disk. Okay, so I think we've created that. Now I want to create a system log object, which I'm going to call the log. That's what they called theirs. They called it the log. So I'll just use their same name, the log, equals new system log. We're going to use a constructor, which we just wrote, which just takes this array list that we just created and it puts it into the private instance variable. So that should create that. Now what we could do is we could try and print it out, system.out.println. If we made a good toString, this should work, the log. And we don't even do, right? This should print them all out on separate lines, and it should look exactly like what we already have. End class system log driver end method main. Okay, so that should test out our constructor. Now, what we're going to do is we got to create a new list to hold the removed list. It's going to hold log messages, and I'm going to call it removed log, and it equals a new array list. I don't think, I don't think we necessarily need to initialize it. Okay, new array list, log message. So this is an array list to hold the removed objects. So now we're going to say removed log equals the log. So we're going to call the method remove messages. Now you could comment all this out and just test the first part before you get to part C. It takes a keyword. So the one we've been using is disk. It's a string. So this should run the remove messages method, and that method returns an array list of the removed logs. So then we could try and print that out. Now the only thing is I don't really have like a toString for that. So I'd have to use like a for loop or a for each loop. I mean, we could do a for loop just for the fun of it. For log message, call it LM for log message, and then it's called removed log, and system.out print ln ln. So that should use our toString from the log message class. Done that correctly. We might want to go ahead and put another blank line here, system.out.println, just to spacing things out. Now we've printed out the removed one. That should confirm if it removed all the right ones, or at least put them in there, and put another blank line. Now I want to print out system log object and confirm that the removed messages are no longer there. So essentially I'm redoing what I did up there. The log should now be changed. And so that should help us confirm. So we print out first, see what's in there. We run this, print out the removed array list that it gives back, and then also reprint out the log again to show that it actually got rid of them. So this should give you a good amount of head start to get a working version. Now you need to go back and do those methods. So let's see. I'm sure I missed this. Okay. Now, if we close these, we can see now even more class composition. System log driver has system log objects in it, and it also has log messages in it. So that's it.